I am so excited to film this video because I got to talk about something that has given me a lot of joy in the past year, which has been bouldering.
That is a nice boulder.
I started bouldering around 1 year ago, so that was in the summer of 2017. And when I first started bouldering, I was climbing between V0 and V2, and now I can comfortably climb V5 and some V6. First of all, I'm just going to show a little highlight reel of some of the stuff that I've been climbing for the past year, just to give you a sense of my progress and how I've improved over the past year. Hopefully you can tell. Bouldering is an incredibly fun sport and something that I wish I started earlier because there aren't any ropes involved. The only real equipment you need are shoes and chalk, and the walls are so low that you don't hurt yourself if you fall. I boulder at an indoor gym a couple times a week, but I have bouldered outside on an actual rock a couple of times. You should totally check out my Bishop vlog because that was one of the first times that I started climbing outside. It was one of the best weekends of my life. If you're curious to see whether there are any outside climbing routes near where you live, you should totally download the Mountain Project app and then just search your area and see whether there are any developed outside climbs there. I've learned a couple of things as a newbie climber. There are 5 things that I want to share with someone who's starting to think that they want to break into climbing but isn't really sure what to expect. I was really intimidated when I started out, but hopefully these 5 tips that I'm about to share give you a little bit of guidance and that little extra push to finally start bouldering regularly. My first tip is kind of obvious. It's to be consistent. So when I started out bouldering, I was climbing around 3 times a week, and I think this is really good because you don't really have to climb 2 days in a row, especially if you are getting sore a lot in the beginning. So when I started out climbing, the area that got sore the fastest was my forearms right here, and so that made it really hard to keep climbing for a really long time. If you climb consistently and you build up muscle in this area, you'll find that you'll be able to climb longer and harder climbs that were just impossible with your weak forearms. Another benefit of having a consistent schedule of when you're climbing is you get to bump into people who also have the same schedule as you. And that brings me to my next point, which is make friends. Climbing is, I think, inherently a social sport because most of the time you're not on the wall, you're just down on the floor where the other climbers are. It's really easy to make small talk about climbs, about problems, and eventually just talk about regular things in your life. It's good to make friends when you're climbing, but if you're intent on getting better as a beginner, I think it might be advantageous to make friends with someone who is a lot better than you. And you might think, hey, why is someone who's like incredible going to be friends with me when I provide no value? That's not true. When I started out, I was barely climbing V2, but I had a couple of friends who could comfortably climb V5 and V6, and they totally respected me just like any other climber because they knew I was just starting out. And the added benefit of having them as my friends is they would give me pointers when I climbed, and they would help me with my technique, and they would be able to climb and flash my problem easily, and I'd be able to just copy their beta. And so having friends who already climb is a really good way of learning the right technique early on and just getting that extra bit of stoke to help you up the wall. I thought that when I started climbing that climbers would kind of be like surfers. I know, coming from California, whatever. I thought climbers would be territorial like surfers and be kind of intimidating and aggressive towards newcomers, but that is just so opposite from the truth, and it's something that I'm going to talk about in my most important point, which is point number 5, so please stick around till then. If you do want to skip around, I usually always put the timestamps in my description box, so please check that out. My third tip, and a really useful piece of advice that I picked up pretty early on in my climbing career, climb pretty, not burly. Obviously there are going to be some climbs that require a little bit of muscle. For the most part, climbers that are really excellent make it look almost effortless when they're climbing difficult climbs. And this is because they're climbing gracefully and intelligently, not trying to waste any of their effort when they're climbing. They have really good technique, and that's something that you should focus on in the beginning. It's kind of a misconception that you should be supplementing your climbing with a lot of weight so that you can like bulk up and get better faster. While it is important to have like a baseline level of muscle tone, there is no substitute for good climbing technique. And so in the beginning, what I would do is I would climb something that was like maybe 70% of my max effort. I don't know what that means, take that as you will. And I would just climb it over and over again until I could climb it perfectly, where I could just climb up the wall and make it look so graceful and beautiful that I would be proud of it if I looked back on it on a video or something. And so this is kind of like my version of 4x4s. If you're not familiar with what they are, it's like a popular climbing practice that a lot of people recommend. I'm a little lazy, so I never got into them, but feel free to look that up right now. I'll like have a description in the box below. My fourth tip is to get shoes that fit and are comfortable. It's kind of a misconception that climbing shoes should be painful when you wear them. That's not really a school of thought that's very popular anymore. You should just get climbing shoes that are well-fitting and don't allow any room for your toes to move around. What I would recommend is just go to an REI or like an outdoor store near where you live and try on the climbing shoes that they have and just see what size fits. My first climbing shoe, I think, was the La Sportiva Oxygen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It was a very non-aggressive shoe, easy to wear, it worked great, and it was pretty true to size. I ordered it online in my street shoe size. Some people order a size down, but I don't really recommend that. I recommend just going in, trying it, seeing whether it's comfortable or not. You should be able to like walk around in your shoes. And when you're starting out, you should get like a relatively low profile, easy shoe to wear. Eventually, when you are doing gnarlier climbs, you can get like those really aggressive shoes. I actually have, this is an example of like a shoe that I wear right now. What's it? The So Ill Street. And it's a little bit aggressive. So I would recommend a shoe that is more like this. My last and most important tip, and something that I wished I knew earlier on, is don't be insecure when you're climbing. So I mentioned this earlier, like I originally thought that climbers would be jerks and be territorial and be pissed off if I was like climbing an easy climb that was like blocking their more difficult project, but that's honestly not the case. Okay, as someone who has climbed for like a year and is more of like an experienced climber now, I guess, I see beginners in the gym all the time. I see people like signing the safety waivers and climbing for the first time almost every single time that I'm in the gym. So I get it, and I'm stoked that people are trying out the sport that I enjoy. If I'm climbing a difficult project and there happens to be other people around who might be climbing easier stuff than I am, I'll just wait my turn. I mean, it really doesn't matter. We are all paying to use the facility, and I do not own the gym because I might be climbing higher grade stuff. It just really doesn't work that way. So originally when I started climbing, I would feel like I had to go to a secluded area of the gym where no one was if I was climbing V3 or below. And you really don't have to do that. I know it's scary when you're on the wall and you can feel like eyes on you, and you're just gonna have to get used to that. As long as you're in a gym and there are other people in it, they're going to watch you. It's like one of the only things to do when you're down on the floor. I have never in my life heard a climber criticize or make fun of another climber for being a beginner, but I have heard climbers compliment beginner climbers and compliment the beginner climbers behind their back, if that makes sense. Like just last week, I saw someone in the rental shoes climb up a more difficult V1, and I heard people on the ground saying, oh, their technique is pretty good, like that's a pretty difficult V1. It's like, if you hear people talking, more often than not, they're actually complimenting you and giving you stoke rather than berating you or making fun of you. As far as I know, climbers just aren't the type of people to be rude or mean to people. I'm sure there's some nasty climbers out there, but I think for the most part, they are pretty decent people. I know it's way easier said than done. I have crazy climbing anxiety. I also just released a video about my anti-anxiety strategies, so I would recommend checking that out as well if it's something you struggle with. I still get intimidated when I'm climbing something in front of someone who is projecting V8 and above, but you just have to understand that everyone was a beginner once, and everyone who is climbing crazy high grades, they were in your shoes not too long ago. And so if you do want to get better, you're just gonna have to get used to that discomfort. A bonus tip, this is my chalk bag. I put essential oil in there. Just a couple of drops and the entire chalk bag and the chalk in it smells incredible. I use kind of like a citrus blend, so I'll put a couple of drops of orange, lime, grapefruit, and lemongrass. I feel like it energizes me and gives me a little zing that I need to to get through a difficult problem. I hope you were all inspired to try out this amazing sport, and if you've made it this far, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. As you can tell, I'm a pretty small YouTuber, so any little subscriber helps me expand my audience and help me spread my message of positivity to more people. All right, I will see you in the next one. See ya.